Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal, where you can see I'm joined by James Benge for what has been the first in a while now of an episode of Inside Extra Time. Apologies, it's been my fault, mate. I've been chasing my kids around Centre Parks. I've been loving life in Madrid, enjoying the Bernabeu and all that sort of stuff. And I've left you on your lonesome for the last couple of weeks. But I'm back now. You're back. We're back, and it is Inside Arsenal Extra Time. How are you doing?
Yeah. We've not missed much, have we? Just 2 legs of probably the best European football I've ever seen Arsenal play, and smashing Ipswich and Crystal Palace. How was Centre Parks though? Actually, this is what we all want to know about.
Expensive, mate.
Yeah,
it was very expensive. It was a lot of fun. Anyway, it was good. It was knackering. It always is. It's one of those holiday Centre Parks. You come back, you're so bloody knackered at the end of it because it's just so much to do, and the kids want to do so much. But yeah, it was really good. And it was, I mean, the Madrid first leg was annoying to miss that, but I had a very special night watching it in the sports bar with my son, which was very, very cool. So I enjoyed that. And then Madrid last week was obviously, the second leg was unbelievable until I deleted my entire podcast, which wasn't the best way to end what had been an amazing couple of days, wiping out my sort of second biggest part of my business. So that was a bit of a dampener on things.
Perfect time to do it as well. When literally everyone on the internet that Thursday morning was like, I will consume all the Arsenal content I can find.
Exactly. And there's me scrambling away in my hotel room thinking, oh my God, I have just deleted the second biggest part of my business. So, but anyway, I'm not going to talk about that because everyone has heard me talk about that for the last week or so as I'm desperately trying to get subscribers and followers back. If you haven't followed yet, then links are down below for the new podcast, the newly formed podcast. If you want to follow it, where you will be getting Inside Arsenal Extra Time every week, as usual, of course. And yeah, so no, it's been a good couple of weeks. Glad to be back. Looking at your face, freshly trimmed hair as well from last time I spoke last night at the Emirates when I left you about 11 o'clock at night.
I was straight down the barbers for my pre-honeymoon haircut this morning. I normally like to chat to Rory, who I'm sure will appreciate the shout out quite a bit. And he was like, you look absolutely knackered tonight. And I was like, I was sort of saying to you on our first failed recording at this that I got home incredibly early. And yet it got completely sidetracked playing Crusader Kings 3. Didn't get to bed till 2:30. So yeah, I'm a bit bleary-eyed this morning. Trying to do anything to take my mind off that awful game of football last night.
Crusader Kings 2. I don't even
know. Crusader Kings 3.
Don't even know what that is.
It's very complex. It's a sort of ultra complex game where you sort of function as the head of state. It sort of encompasses Europe, Africa, and sort of Near East Asia and India. Depending on when you start, from about the years 866 to the fall of Constantinople in 1427. Any history buffs who want to correct me on that date, please let me know. Get in the comments. Yes, great game. Would recommend. Not good if you have children though, because it's a huge time sink.
Definitely not good for me then. Did your missus watch this show by any chance?
No.
Good.
Aggressively disinterested in Arsenal.
Okay, same as mine. Did you crack open a bottle of champagne last night when you got home? Because I've heard vicious rumours that you may well have done after the Real Madrid first leg.
I dragged Tom Canton and look, I'm very objective journalist. I don't, all I hope is that football is the winner. And I was so delighted for football after the first leg of the quarterfinal that I dragged Tom Canton and Harry Symeou to the pub. And I felt like the 2 or 3 pints we had there was insufficient for the jubilance that I felt. So when I got in then at whatever time that was, I may well have cracked open a bottle of champagne and watched the game again.
Wasn't that a bottle of champagne that was being saved for something?
It's been replaced and drunk.
Very good. Well, if you're going to crack open a bottle of champagne, the time to do it is after Declan Rice has just smacked in 2 screamers against Real Madrid at the Emirates. Certainly. We didn't get that last night, unfortunately. It wasn't quite as a fun night and quite as a...
We did get 2 screamers.
and atmospheric. There were two very good goals indeed. Unfortunately, not in the not scored by Arsenal players, but there were a couple of very good goals on show. In that little short walk you have now to get home after the game, what were you sort of thinking about as you're walking home in terms of sort of summing up that the game yesterday and the result and kind of what it means and all that sort of stuff at the moment? How did you sort of park things as you were going home?
I mean, it felt very flat, around the ground about an hour after the final whistle. But more like a sort of, right, that's done, let's all just get home vibe.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there will be some people watching this, fans watching this, saying, look, still got to worry about keeping hold of second, because if they don't, then there won't be more fan bases who've could never even dream of finishing second in the Premier League chanting at Arsenal like it's some sort of failure. And I know there'll be some fans who are still saying, look, Champions League football is still to be secured. But kind of my view on that is it feels like it should all be okay come the end of the season. So I think there's just a sort of faintly like lethargicness to it. Because I don't think anyone believes this will be anything like the Arsenal we see next Tuesday. And so it's sort of, it felt hard to sort of rouse any great emotion from it. But I do think there is that nagging sense of frustration, and we'll come to talk about this, that the draws, they keep happening, and they keep happening in faintly sloppy ways of late. I don't think it will matter, but it's, you worry about those sloppy errors considering who you might be gifting possession to on Tuesday night.
Yes, I agree. The thing with that is I don't see any way that we see a similar performance against PSG than what we saw last night. I just do not see that. I see Arsenal putting a solid performance they're putting against Real Madrid. I'm not saying they get the same result as they got against Real Madrid, but I think we will see a much similar performance to the intensity, everything that we saw in the two legs against Real Madrid, against PSG. I think the atmosphere is going to be different. The night's going to be different. Everything, there was a weird vibe around the place yesterday. It's impossible to get away from the fact that this is just going through the motions in the Premier League now, isn't it? From fans going to the games, from even us going to the games and working on it at the point of view, like you said, you didn't file anything from the game last night. I did my player ratings for the goal, and then I'm off. It's just that there's nothing really on it doesn't feel like there's anything on these games because everyone's just waiting for the main event. I was watching WrestleMania at the weekend and, there was some of the filler matches on the card beforehand. I was just like, come on, just get rid of it because I want to see Seth Rollins versus CM Punk versus Roman Reigns. And it's just, you're just waiting for the main event. And right now with Arsenal, the main event is the Champions League. It has been for a while. I think that's why we're seeing these draws. We've seen these draws of late, certainly at home recently. And because just all focus from everyone, as much as Mikel can say we've got to win all these games, and much as the players will say it publicly when there's a camera thrust in their face, I think it's very, very hard, psychologically, mentally, whatever, to not just have that slight lack of focus now in the Premier League because there's such a massive thing on the horizon that you just can't stop thinking about.
And it was the thing that everyone was talking about at the ground last night. You would stop and talk to people, and it wouldn't be like, oh, have you seen Eddie Nketiah's back? It would be, oh, what do you think about what you think about Tuesday night? Do you think we can do it? So every conversation I had with sort of fans and people I know was all framed around Tuesday night. And I don't judge anyone for that, and the players as well. Because I'm feeling the same way. I've already been writing before this game had happened. I was writing my preview content, was recording preview videos for the PSG game, which goes to show you, doesn't it? Like just how beyond the risk of an injury, and that was what it felt like. The team just didn't want to get injured, didn't want to exert too much effort. Whereas it felt a bit different for Palace. I don't know why. I think they probably wanted to just build some momentum more so. They've got a tougher task comparatively. But yeah, it just felt understandably, undeniably a little bit like everyone was holding energy and holding what they've got in reserve for the big one. And it is going to be a big one.
I'm just looking. So it's 5 draws now in the last 8 games for Arsenal. They're unbeaten in those 8 league games, but they've drawn 5 of them. Drawn at Forest, drawn at United, drawn at Everton, and then you had the home draws against Brentford and Palace. That's 13 draws now for the season in the Premier League. I mean, even if you just go back to this run, starting with the defeat against West Ham and then the 5 draws in 8 games that have followed, that's what 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That's like 13 points dropped in the last, since February the 22nd. So as much as Liverpool is so far ahead now, it could have been very different had Arsenal, picked up points in these games. So they have been very, very costly, and it has been a story of the season. I know there's been sort of, when you look at some of the reasons for the draws earlier on in the season, red cards and all that sort of stuff. But why do you think? Because this is more draws now this season in the Premier League than Arsenal have had in each of the last 2 seasons combined. They've been very good at not drawing games under Mikel Arteta of late. It's either, and I think you have to be, because if you want to win the Premier League, certainly when you're going to up against the sort of peak Man City, a draw was absolutely like a defeat. And it kind of has been this season as well, because Liverpool was so rampant early on in the season. So what do you put it down to, the draws? Is it the attack? Is it the defence? Is it a mixture of the two? I mean, why do you think these draws have suddenly crept into Arsenal's game this season?
It feels to me like the attack. I mean, I think you have mentioned, and we should hammer on that point, that especially early in the season, there were real mitigating circumstances around red cards and the like, especially that big City draw. I think to an extent at the moment, this is an Arsenal team that it's disingenuous to say it's a bad attack. And it is an attack that can catch fire. We saw that last weekend. We see that fairly regularly, but I think the sort of base operating level for it is a little bit lower. The defense has got stronger, and the defense is still out of this world. One of the best defenses, for instance, in the Champions League that we've seen in the last 5-6 years. And I think there has been a little bit of a rebalancing in that direction. I don't know to what extent that's just informed by injuries as well. Like in that run of 5 draws in 8 games, how many of those games has Bukayo Saka started and played extended minutes in? How many of them has someone else been rested because Mikel Arteta, who says one thing but shows us with his actions he's prioritising the Champions League, has been doing exactly that? I mean, we know that there's sort of the cavalry coming around the horizon, and we know that Mikel Merino has done wonderfully as a centre forward, given what was expected of him in that position and given his experience in it. But it's not a full strength attack. It's not firing on all cylinders. I do think that goes some of the way to sort of why the football's been a bit horseshoey. It's been a little bit lacking in incision and lacking in craft and guile. And I thought there were moments where it looked like Arsenal were a bit better than that, even though I thought Palace were the better team. I really liked some of the stuff Trossard was doing as he sort of looped around the attack. I mean, it doesn't help that Martin Odegaard just looks like he needs a summer off. But yeah, I think it's the attack. I'm sure you would agree on that.
Yeah, I would. It's interesting, though, and I didn't know this until I saw the stat come up yesterday, that Arsenal haven't kept back-to-back clean sheets in the Premier League since the opening fortnight of the season. Those first 2 games of the season when they won, who did they beat on the opening day? Let me have a look. I got it up here.
Wasn't that unnervy?
Wolves. Yeah, and then they went to Villa and won 2-0 the following week. That's the last time they've kept back-to-back clean sheets in the Premier League. So basically, the first week of the season, which is pretty mad. Because I do agree with you. I think it's the attack. I think because again, there's so many games where it's always been such a narrow margin of Arsenal having a lead. When you look at, I think it was how many points is it? 18 points have dropped from leading positions now this season. With these draws, and it always feels like games still just always on a bit of a knife edge. You've never had that. You never really have that 2-3 goal advantage where you just feel like the game's secured now. It's just been a season of. When I always kind of feel it when you do finally getting ready to file your stuff, you never have that last 20 minutes where you're totally calm. You can write it, and you're not going to have to rip everything up and rewrite it because there's been a late goal or anything like that, because the lead is so commanding.
We love that, guys. It's our dream. We get to be pretentious and play with our copy.
Yeah, so you love being able to do that as a journalist, because it's like you just know you're not going to have that. Oh no, I've got to rewrite everything here. But this season, it's felt like pretty much every game, you've always been reluctant to really sort of to go with it at the start. So I do think it's the attack, definitely. But I do think the defence, and you look at yesterday's game, scoring 2 goals at home against Crystal Palace, that should be enough to win the game, but you don't get it done. So I do think it's it's a bit of a collective, but I would certainly be pointing the finger at the attack more. So what do we do then, do you think? And we'll talk about Andrea Berta now and Arsenal and the transfer window that is coming up, because obviously we've got the massive game against PSG. We'll get to that. But it's been a tough season Premier League-wise, and no one wants a repeat of this season next season. You want to really be challenging. This team should be challenging for the Premier League title. We shouldn't be in April or March next season and again kind of just going through the motions. So what do you do? What do the priorities need to be in the transfer window to ensure that this doesn't happen again, and that Arsenal can stay in the race until the very end and hopefully even win it next season? When you're looking at the job that's facing Andrea Berta and the club this summer in the window, what do you think the absolute priorities need to be? Is it just as simple as saying striker, that's it, job done? What do you think?
It would go a long way. And I think this is partly a recruitment thing, more than just like, it's more recruitment than it will sound. But I think Arsenal have to be better at being flat track bullies. I wouldn't say Palace, that even at home, I wouldn't say Palace is a flat track. But sort of the game that's stuck in my mind, even when you were talking about, it's not that stress-free filing your copy from the Emirates and all that at the moment, was the Ipswich game just after Christmas. Not least because if there's a game where you'd really like your copy to be done around the hour mark, it's the one on the 27th of December, where Arsenal are sort of clinging on against a team that have come to keep the score at 1-0 down until the 85th minute and fling some options in the box. To an extent, it's the sort of Declan Rice at 8. I think also to an extent, players like Kai Havertz just sort of are. I think they're really good against top-level opposition, where it can become about the jewels and the strength of your out of possession shape and your ability to interlink on the counter. But I don't know how to quite explain why, but they just wouldn't kill teams. Who is the player in the Arsenal squad right now? Maybe it's Saka. Other than Saka, who you would say when Coventry City, to pick a team, come up next season and come to the Emirates, he's going to be an Erling Haaland figure. He'll get a hat trick. There isn't sort of a player that kills that. When you flashed up a picture of Super Benge, I was like, well, Charles, I suppose you could make the case that
definitely not him.
Control is a killer, but
is it him? Is it Gyökeres? Is he the type? I mean,
one thing I'd say is he's used to playing against.
Exactly. You look at the sheer amount of goals he's got, albeit against sort of not the opposition that he's going to be playing in the Premier League if he does make a move to a Premier League, but he has certainly bullied a lot of flat tracks in the last couple of seasons. He knows how to do that, and he will muscle defenders out of the way. He will score goals. We know that he's a player that Arsenal are looking at, that Andrea Berta likes. So is that the sort of player that you're getting at when you're saying that?
Yeah, not necessarily him specifically was in my mind, but it is players of that ilk that maybe are sort of football wise sometimes a little ill-disciplined for the Man City away. And I could, if Arsenal signed Victor Gyökeres, my suspicion is he would certainly not, like, for the first big away game against a Big Six team, if he's fit and Kai Havertz is fit, I'd be really surprised if Mikel Arteta picked Gyökeres over Kai Havertz for the first game, let's say. But I just think this is a team that doesn't bully the other team often enough. That doesn't have that sniff of blood in the water.
I agree. I think you're spot on in the way you're describing that, and that's why I look at players like Gyökeres, who is just, for me, when I've seen him play, even when he played against Arsenal, to be honest, when I saw him do it against Kivior, when Kivior came on, he immediately bullied him. He immediately got himself on him, saw the weak link, what he thought was the weak link in that defence after going, having a really tough time against Saliba and Gabriel. And then he immediately sort of started bullying him. You've seen what he's doing, what he's done in Portugal, even in the Champions League as well. It's just that I just like, he's so determined to get towards goal. And I know what you mean. I don't feel Havertz or some of the other players in the Arsenal squad really have that absolute hunger just to put teams away, put defenders away and score goals. I agree again with what you're saying. If the start of the season Arsenal got Man City away or Liverpool away in the first sort of 3 or 4 games, and they have signed a Gyökeres type or or I don't know, Sesko type. I still think it'll be Havertz who starts up front in that game early doors. But I do feel they need that. They need that ruthlessness in the final third to sort of, over a course of a long Premier League season, to turn some of these draws into wins. I really do think that.
It's probably also another 8 as well. Someone with a little bit more guile, creativity. I know the guy. I know he's not really played as an 8 for Crystal Palace, but I know that. Oh, he's special.
Nice volley, that.
Oh man, this is the first time you see a volley like that. You always assume that they've shanked it, always, and you should assume that he's meant that, and he meant to put that as near to the post as he could.
Yeah. The technique the technique, because he wasn't just one of those ones. Because we've seen Declan Rice try a few of those this season, but this was one. It was good from Wharton, but it was a little bit high. So Eze had to actually, it was like a scissor kick almost. He jumps as he was doing it. The technique to keep it down, and such a good guy. I love him. I think he'd be great. I really, really do. I think he'd be great.
The person sat next to me is a Crystal Palace fan, and I think by the end they were getting quite tired of me pitching Eze moving to the Emirates. Brilliant player, and I think something like that is needed. I wonder. We think that's what the vision was for Fabio Vieira, and there were games where Arteta sort of looked at Vieira left 8, Ødegaard right 8. I don't think it will be Fabio Vieira. By all accounts, he's not exactly pulling up trees in Portugal. Maybe, though, it'll have to be him if you strengthen elsewhere. And if you can make yourself good enough, I do think there are games where this season you'd have gone, well, yeah, I wouldn't mind a Fabio Vieira. It's a tough one because the budget for these guys we like racks up an awful lot, and someone like Eze is probably almost one of your first reserves, and that's a hard pitch, and it's also a lot of money to spend on someone to come off the bench.
Yeah, because I think we know when you kind of look at how you change this team for next season, certainly in the Premier League, you would envisage a new striker at the top of the sort of pitch for Arsenal. But then, if Zubimendi does come in, which Arsenal are pretty confident this is going to get done, and I imagine it will get done pretty early on in the transfer window as well. That the idea is still to keep Declan Rice as an 8. And so, although we're talking about Eze there, Eze's not going to start ahead of Declan Rice next season, is he? He's just not. And so, ultimately, I think the vision that Arsenal clearly have, and Arteta and Berta, who's come on board with this, have is Zubimendi 6, Rice, Ødegaard, potential new striker, and then obviously Saka on the right, and then maybe someone on the left to replace Gabriel Martinelli or to share the burden with Gabriel Martinelli. So that's how it's not massive changes, is it? It's still kind of similar layout in midfield, obviously a new striker, but Kai Havertz will still be involved. And then you kind of look at left winger. I'm not sure we're going to definitely see that sort of left 8 player come in. And do you think that'll be enough to really change things?
I mean, the one player we haven't mentioned and is worthy of discussion in the equation is Ethan Nwaneri. I suppose the challenge is there's what we think Arsenal need, and there's what Mikel Arteta seems to think Arsenal need, and where he's gravitating. And it's pretty clear, given not only, I mean, look, there's all sorts of reports about Zubimendi and maybe going elsewhere, but everything I've heard and you've heard, I'm sure as well, is that Arsenal have no indication that that's changing. They're still planning around his arrival, expecting him to come. And I think when you see the business with Thomas Partey as well, it's all about Declan Rice at 8. So, I mean, what you're talking then is the reserve option for Ødegaard, who potentially can play alongside Ødegaard in some other games as well. So, yeah, I sort of get in that context why you and I might want Eze, but you and I don't have to, sign off on the checks in that regard. So I do get it. It's maybe it'll just always be something where we disagree with Mikel Arteta, but you know what? He's done quite a good job so far. So benefit of the doubt, much like, you and I think you were. I said no. I've been sort of quite hard on the give Mikel Arteta the benefit of the doubt on Mikel Merino thing as well. But it all sort of locks together as 2/3 off ball box crashing left eights in Merino and Rice, 2 tempo setting sixes, Erdegaard and his backup. It ain't going to change. If anything, we're going to establish it more as this is how Arsenal play next season.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've also got, I suppose, that when you talk about the sort of box crashing eights as well, Kai Havertz might well come into that mix next season as well. Because if you've got a new striker playing up top, which we think we will, then Havertz is still going to get plenty of minutes next season, whether that be as a striker sharing the role with Gyökeres or whoever it is, but also playing as a potential number 8. And Merino, the numbers that Merino has produced in the second half of the season since making that switch, if he can sort of replicate that next season when he does play, that's another sort of attacking option that Arsenal have that maybe they thought they didn't. So I do think, I don't think that you need massive surgery on this Arsenal team to make them very, very good next season. I do think that, injuries have played such a part this season. Unavailability has played such a part this season. And you would hope that's not going to be the same next year. You would cross your fingers and hope you're not quite so unlucky next year. And you would hope also that your club does enough business in the summer, doesn't leave themselves open to what they left themselves open to this season. They learn from the mistakes in the last couple of transfer windows. And so I don't think it requires major surgery. The fact that it is 13 draws, we're not talking about 13 defeats. We're not talking about Spurs here. We're talking about 13 draws that could easily, and for most of those draws, Arsenal have been leading as well. So it's not like they've been fighting back to salvage a draw. They've managed to throw, winning positions away. And so it doesn't take massive amounts of work, I think, to sort of flip that and turn those draws into wins next season. That's what you just kind of hope Arsenal are going to be able to do. So your priorities then, if you're Andrea Berta now, you're sitting in your office, you're talking to Mikel Arteta, you're looking at the league table, you're looking at the draws numbers, saying, right, how do we change this? Is it a case of we kind of stick to our guns a little bit? We've done a lot of work. The squad's good. We just need to add maybe a bit of a ruthless killer up front, maybe a striker. Well, definitely a striker, maybe another attacking option. We're bringing in a midfielder. We'll sort the goalkeeper number 2 out at some point. But not wholesale changes.
As we know, that is the real priority, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's where the big money goes.
There'll have to be a left back thrown into the mix at some point as well.
I mean, yeah, you got to get yourself a little treat. I think that left backs are like Mikel Arteta's treats, aren't they? I bet you'll look and they're all signed on like a Friday afternoon. They've all arrived then, so Mikel Arteta gets something new to think about over the weekend. Yeah, the budget there is going to be reasonable. It will go quickly on Zubimendi, the striker, and I do still think you need then that extra forward. You assume that Reece Nelson. Well, I believe that Reece Nelson will probably go on a permanent, and I think he kind of impressed people at Fulham if he can get fit. I think then you would sort of look at that squad and say, this is the best we can do for now. Always in a sort of mindset of trying to find upgrades in every position. But I think if they come into the new season with a well-established striker, left winger and Zubimendi, I'd look at that and I kind of think, I don't know what more can be done right now. It's great position to be in. It's just frustrating that, like you say, it's so many little fine details, I think, that have kind of led to this chasm to Liverpool. And I don't think the points tally is reflective of the gap. Well, I know it's not reflective of the gap.
No, I think that exactly. I think we're all going to look back on this season with quite a bit of regret in terms of how the Premier League. I'm sure Mikel Arteta and the players would as well. I think they know full well they should have been right there this season, and it just hasn't happened for a multitude of reasons. But we are 5 days away from a Champions League semi-final, only the third in Arsenal's history against PSG. Arsenal are standing on the verge of, arguably, up there with one of the most historic seasons in the club's history. So there's still an awful lot to play for here. When you sort of look ahead to that PSG game, because this is the last time we're going to be talking until afterwards, where hopefully we're going to get together next week and discuss a monumental Arsenal victory. But when you look at how he's going to set things up for PSG, what it's quite hard because we don't know the full extent of what's going on with Mikel Merino yesterday, and they were giving absolutely nothing away yesterday, obviously. But he was in training the day before. I don't think it's going to be. I'd be stunned if Merino's not involved on Tuesday night. How do you think he sets things up for PSG? I mean, obviously the Thomas Partey situation is kind of means it's not quite as easy as we thought it was going to be when it comes to the team selection.
The only plus side I would say to that is that Trossard's had 2 games that are good enough that I think we maybe have. If Partey was available, we might be talking about, do you play Merino up top or do you play Trossard up top? So obviously we don't have that choice. I think Merino comes in at left 8, Declan Rice sits, Trossard plays as the 9, which I think he's done quite well.
I think he's played really well recently. I think we're seeing sort of last season, that run towards the end of last season when he was really clutch, Trossard, wasn't he? I think we're beginning to see that his movements have been really, really good, I think, and his finishing has been good.
Yeah, 100%. I kind of like that as a way of playing against PSG as well. Just sort of flitting around the surfaces, trying to create overloads. It feels to me like this is a game that's going to get one out wide as well. Whose superstar wingers do the business. I think everyone that watches this knows my feelings about Yuri and Timber. I think this is going to be his biggest test yet. I think on form right now, Kvaratskhelia is a tougher task than Vinicius Junior. Genuinely. So can he and Miles Lewis-Skelly against Barcola or Doué just sort of lock down their flanks? Can Martinelli? I mean, we know Martinelli and Saka will help, and can they do that while also getting the better of Mendes? Saka was so good against Mendes last time, and also the same with Martinelli. Great to have him back in form. I thought he looked really good again last night. Not quite as good as he's been, but like keeping up a good level of performance. Because I kind of think in the midfield, Arsenal will be too strong. Well, they've got the strength, but they haven't got the technique. So
they certainly dominated physically in that game in October. Arsenal. It was a real physical, dominant performance from them. I think you're right. I think during Timber, he passed that test against Vinicius beyond my wildest dreams. I knew that was going to be such a key battle, and I thought that Timber would do well. But he was so good in those 2 games, and as was Miles Lewis-Skelly. And I think that is 100% the key area in this game. When you look at how PSG played and how they've done against Liverpool, how they did against Aston Villa, the threat that they carried. I know the midfielders, quality central midfielders in terms of controlling the game and all that sort of stuff, but the threat from out wide, the pace that they have out wide, if Arsenal's fullbacks can lock them down and can just really frustrate them, I think Arsenal got the ingredients to really go on and hurt. But we saw it in October. They can hurt PSG, no doubt about it. And they can be physically too strong for PSG. It's just about keeping those real flair attacking players who weren't involved for PSG that night in October. Dembele, Kvaratskhelia, and players like Doué have just come on leaps and bounds since then as well. So it is a different animal that Arsenal are going to be facing. But I think if the fullbacks can really nullify their threat down those flanks, I think Arsenal have got a really good chance.
Can I give you a bit of hope? A cause for hope?
I've already got cause for hope, I have to say.
Give you a little bit more. I've been doing my big, like I said at the top of the show, I've been doing my big preview for the Champions League semi-finals, and it was why each team will win, why each team won't win. I find it really hard for Arsenal to come up with a reason why. Like, I know why it is. It's that they don't have experience at this level, but that's all I've got. Like, which I always
not a PSG, do they?
Exactly. And I was like, it's a cop out. Like, what's the data telling you? There are arguments that they're not. They basically had an awful lot of wonder goals go in, and you can't rely on that to happen again. But actually, for PSG as well, one thing that I think really makes Arsenal makes them a good matchup for Arsenal is when their moves don't keep going. Like, when they don't get in quick offense, they just tend to sort of hoof it or, take bad shots or what look like bad shots. I mean, because the examples I'm thinking of, some goals like Doué's and Kvaratskhelia against Aston Villa, which of course were not bad shots by outcome, but if you're a defence, letting Desiree Doué hit it from 25 yards, in general, it's not a bad end to a move. And of late, PSG have been getting a lot more hero bally in their shots. I think that suits Arsenal quite well because, side note, Arsenal are the best shot blocking big team in the world. So I think this is the best matchup Arsenal could have got from the semi-finals, except Inter, because Inter are rubbish. Or Inter are rubbish compared to the other three.
You think?
Inter are the worst. Yeah.
Interesting. Although saying that, I did watch after we beat Madrid in the Bernabeu, and I came back and I went out. I was sitting in where was I? A place called Beer Station.
Oh.
About 2 a.m. With loads of Arsenal fans, and on the big screen they were showing a replay of the Inter versus Bayern game at San Siro that Inter won, and we were sitting there thinking, how on earth have Bayern not won this game?
Yeah.
They had so many chances, isn't it? But of course, Inter are the only team to beat Arsenal so far in the.
Indeed, and I want to say they are I will correct myself. They are the inferior team of the four left.
Okay. Well, we've not got too long to wait. Cannot wait for that game. What a night that is going to be. Right, I'm going to go on to a few questions now before we wrap this one up. One sec. So Matt says, simple question, are we a boring team to watch? I can only think of a few games where I've really enjoyed the team's performance.
You know what I found quite boring towards the end?
What?
Elegant Arsene Wenger football that ended in a 2-1 defeat to Swansea. Yeah, I think like
I know what Matt's getting at here, though.
Yeah,
it's not. There's been a lot of games this season where you're sort of standing around, whether I'm in the stands, my dad, or in the press box watching it, where you're just like, nothing's really happening here. But I don't see Arsenal being that team next season. That's the thing. I kind of feel like a lot of things have combined for this to happen this season. I don't think we're a boring team to watch. I think we're an efficient team who have just missed that real key ingredient this season. And I think, or I hope, that next season we'll have that ingredient and we'll be a much, much better proposition and games will be very different.
Arsenal aren't boring when they play PSV and PSV say, oh, we'll play you with our style. We'll go at you. And they wouldn't be boring if Crystal Palace, Brentford were like, we'll take you on. You attack, we attack. They wouldn't be boring then. I think Arsenal are really good at winning. Well, obviously, this season they haven't been, but Arsenal play in a way that maximizes their chances of winning football matches. I don't know, having covered this club for a decade and obviously followed it a lot longer, I spent a lot of that time yearning to see Arsenal teams that prioritize winning football matches. And I really respect that about Mikel Arteta's team.
Mm-hmm. Gordon says, hi guys, I was wondering, was White just rested last night or has he had another setback? I don't know the answer to that. There's been a lot of talk that his wife may well have given birth and that was why he wasn't around. So I don't know if that's true or not. We did ask a question yesterday in the press room before the game and I didn't get a full answer on what had happened. He was training. He was in full training on Tuesday.
I think the people I asked, there was sort of a sense it might be workload management.
Right. Yeah, he was in full training. He wasn't just like in the gym. He was out on the pitch on Tuesday. So if it is a setback, or if it is a sort of injury thing, it's a bit of a worry because it seems to be one game back, one game out, one game back, one game out. And when you kind of been out for 3 or 4 months to try and fix those sort of issues, it is a bit of a worry. But I wasn't able to get to the bottom of exactly what went on with White, and Mikel was not up for sharing too much afterwards.
Mikel was hard work last night
in the Frostco. Yeah, he was angry last night. I really got the sense. I know we were saying there wasn't that much jeopardy in the game, and everyone was a bit like meh about it all. But I think he was angry at that performance. I really got that impression. Gordon also says, I would imagine Mateta will get his big move in the summer. Should we be in the mix for him? Many rumours about Wharton too, but didn't really see much of him last night. Mateta, striker. Arsenal needs a striker. Mateta, is he that guy?
He's not quite good enough. It's really interesting now that Arsenal shopping in Selfridges. Mateta's a Waitrose striker, like really good, great, but Arsenal want the prime, the absolute pick of the pick.
But who's that? Isak. But Isak. Then is there anyone else who
I don't know? But someone like Gyökeres is scoring so many.
In a different league, though.
In a different league.
How many did Mateta score in Portugal?
Yeah.
I think Mateta is really underrated. I really do. I thought it for a long time. I think Mateta is really underrated. I'm glad he's doing what he's doing now, and he's showing how good he is. I think he will get his move. I'm not saying that it should be it will be Arsenal. I kind of agree with you with what you're saying. I think if Mateta ends up being the striker we've waited like 2 or 3 windows to sign, I'd be a bit underwhelmed with that. But I do think he's a good player. So yeah, I think I agree with you.
I loved Wharton, by the way. I thought he was great.
Yeah, I thought he was good last night as well. I thought he was really, really good. I think he's a fabulous player. Also,
this isn't obviously inside Crystal Palace, but I'm fascinated how he plots his trajectory. Because I mean, his viewing point should be, I want to end up at City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Real Madrid, that level of team. And I don't think that level will come in yet.
No, I think he should stay for another season at Palace. I definitely think he should stay for another season at Palace. I think it'd be too early for him to make that move now.
I think he could then end up locked in at like Spurs or United, and it spoils his career.
A couple here on Saliba from Nostradamus and from Max. Nostradamus says Liverpool suspended, Villa, Zagreb hamstring, Girona PSV rested are the only games Saliba hasn't played this season. Surely managing his minutes starting off against Bournemouth must happen in order for the rest of the this monumental month of fixtures to come. Timber White as right centre backs. Max says, does Saliba need Gabriel as a security blanket to give him confidence to be Superman? Do we need to extend Gabriel not only for how good he is, but also to keep Saliba playing at a world-class level? Maybe they're not individually two of the best centre backs in the world, but they're just the best centre back pairing in the world. Certainly can't blame Saliba comparatively his recent form on Kivior, who's been very good game after game post Gabriel injury. Saliba looks pretty average playing for France. Saliba's game yesterday, I thought 1-on-1 he was fantastic. I thought he gave Eddie and Nketiah an absolute torrid time. 1-on-1, I thought he was brilliant. But then his all-round game, there were moments where he just looked edgy. The whole team did. I think it stemmed from David Raya, who had a weird night, David Raya, and I think that filtered through to the rest of the team. Because I thought there were some good, strong performances. But as a team, it just didn't really work. They just seemed a little bit off it, and that chemistry wasn't there. And I think that resulted in the sort of overall performance for Arsenal. I'm not worried about Saliba. I have to say, I'm really, really not worried about him. Against Madrid, he was unbelievable in the Bernabeu.
Yeah.
Like, seriously unbelievable. He made one mistake. It was a costly mistake. It led to a goal. But it happens. And I know this one's happened straight off the back of it. Again, it was a very similar mistake. But I don't look at Saliba now and think, oh, I'm worried these mistakes are creeping into his game. I think it's just a coincidence that 2 have happened in a short space of time. But there's no way. I look at that performance at the Bernabeu. He was majestic at the Bernabeu until that era. He was so good. So no, I'm not overly worried about him. Maybe, as Nostradamus says, rest him against Bournemouth between the 2 games. Give him a rest there because he has played loads and loads of football, and of course he did play. He was at the Euros as well in the summer, so this has been a really draining period for him. But I'm not worried about him long term.
My theory is, and I think Gabriel had a bit of the same at his age, that he's just a bit sloppy when Arsenal can get away with him being sloppy. I don't think Saliba would have made the mistake he made in the Bernabeu if it was 3-0 still on aggregate. And I don't think he'd have made the mistake he made last night if this game had anything on it. I do wonder if there is also, and I agree with Nostradamus, although I wouldn't rest him for Bournemouth. I might rest him for a game like Liverpool, I just think it may well also be a little bit of mental fatigue. He doesn't look like he's physically fatigued at all, but how could you not be mentally fatigued? Because it's been constant. I mean, it's fight your way back from an injury, having fought for a title and fought to prove you are as good as you think you are, fight for a title again, fight for the European Championships, and then this season with Arsenal, it's been relentless. He deserves a summer off.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're spot on as well. That mistake at the Bernabeu doesn't happen if Arsenal hadn't scored a minute earlier than that. Absolutely, because nothing we've seen.
Disgraceful, though. Can you imagine being the only team to have not only won on their first 2 visits to the Bernabeu, but surely Arsenal would be the first team to keep a clean sheet in their first 4 meetings with Real Madrid.
Yeah, Yeah.
Sell him.
Samuel says, question for extra time. Given the constant injuries we experienced this season, do you think by reaching the semi-finals of Champions League, Arsenal have had a good season? And if we get knocked out in the semis, how would you rate Arteta's effort? Look, do I think by reaching the semi-finals, Arsenal had a good season? No. Do I think if Arsenal win the Champions League, they've had a good season? Absolutely. You cannot win the Champions League and not have a good season. Has it been domestically? It would have been a disappointing season, but I'm sorry, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, no one is going to be looking back at the season if Arsenal win the Champions League, say, they finished second, 15 points behind Liverpool that season. They'll be thinking Arsenal won the Champions League for the first time in their history. They beat Real Madrid. They knocked the holders out of the Bernabeu. They knocked out PSG in the semi-finals, and then they beat either Barcelona or Inter Milan in the final. So it all revolves around what happens now in the Champions League over the next 4 or 5 weeks, doesn't it, in terms of Arsenal's season and how that's rated and how Arteta's season's rated.
Yeah, it's a disappointing season unless they win the Champions League. But I think you can still also say a disappointing season where Mikel Arteta did a good job. You know, from what we know, at least, he's managed the injury crisis quite effectively if you compare it to some of the other teams that have been in this situation. And I think you do almost, it's quite good, I think, that Samuel there's separated out those two questions, because it's not a good season if Arsenal don't win the Champions League. But we all understand why that is, and it's not Arsenal have a bad manager.
No, I agree, absolutely. I do think Arteta will have, or he needs to learn quite a bit from this season as well, though. I think it's a learning season for Arsenal and for Mikel Arteta. If things don't go their way in the Champions League, then I think lessons need to be learned to ensure we don't kind of leave ourselves open as we have done to fall in by the wayside a little bit. And finally here, someone who calls us Chip and Jim. Sounds like the Chipmunks or something. Correct me if I'm wrong, but for a long time now, Arsenal perceived as being a club who are not friendly to agents. Certainly in the past, Arsenal had public disputes with agents such as Kia Jarabchin, been quite clear about unwillingness to pay large agent fees. As such, Arsenal never been in the race for the transfer to particular players, Kvaratskhelia, Haaland, in which agents play a big role. Do you think the appointment of Berta signals a change in policy in that regard? And maybe the same could be said about the state-run clubs or PIF, considering Berta has done deals with them in the past. Yeah, I mean, Berta's got very close ties with Jorge Mendes, hasn't he? And that was very, very clear in the transfer sort of dealings he did with Atletico Madrid. I would be very surprised if Arsenal get themselves back into a sort of situation that they were in with Kia Jarabchin and Edu at the start. I just don't see any way that happens. You know, that caused a lot of sort of alarm and concern at Arsenal and within the fan base and everything like that. And I just think Arsenal were too savvy now. They were quite an inexperienced sort of club at that point, weren't they? When Edu was there and Mikel had just arrived, and even the Cronkies had only just sort of done the full takeover. It was just, there was, you know, Ivan had left. I think there was just kind of a bit of a vacuum there that some agents managed to take advantage of. I don't see that happening again. We might well see more Jorge Mendes clients come in just because of the relationship that him and Andrea Berta have, but I don't see it becoming, you know, a major issue where Arsenal become dependent on one agent or a couple of agents.
Yeah, this is a really good question. But what I would sort of challenge on it is that, to an extent, when you're a well-run club that is competing at the highest level, I think these sort of agent links just sort of drift to the back burner a bit. Of course, it's important that your sporting director has these ins, knows who to pick up the phone to, but it's very different when you're picking up the phone and saying, would you like to come and join Arsenal, who are competing for Champions League titles, competing for Premier League titles, and play in London, compared to, would you like to, you know, I mean, all that stuff Raul Sanllehi said about different knock and all that.
Yeah.
There's always a level of truth to it, but the knock is a lot louder when you're where Arsenal are now compared to where you were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I think in that sense, you just go and sign the player you think is best for you, not, you know, whoever the useful agent is offering you in the hope that then 6 months down the line, they'll give you someone you actually want.
Yeah.
Arsenal don't need to operate like that anymore. And I don't think they will just because Andrea Berta has taken over either. I think, frankly, one of the things that will help more with Berta is he's been very good at sales with Atletico Madrid. And it's hard doing those in the Premier League, but having someone that knows how to do them, helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. It's very different. The sort of, Arsenal scrambling around in Europa League, or not even in the Europa League, trying to attract players to the club they are now, with players around the world watching them go to the Bernabeu and knock Real Madrid out. A lot of people see that and want to be a part of it. So it's you don't really need to be calling on agent favors anywhere near as much right now. Look, I think that's about it for this week. It's been good being back, mate. We'll be back again next week in the aftermath, hopefully, fingers crossed, of a glorious Arsenal win, probably on Thursday, I imagine, again next week, because there is the other semi-finals to go on the Wednesday night. So I think
we'll find out the opponent, or get a first sense of the opponent.
Maybe so, yeah. So we'll wait until that's done and dusted and get back together on Thursday to do it all over again. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you want to get it on podcast and listen via audio, remember the links are down there. You can do that, so you don't have to watch myself and James's faces. You can just listen to us, get it directly to your phone every single day, this show and my usual daily shows as well. I'll be back in the morning to do it all over again. Anything you want me to discuss in that show, as usual, get into the comments and leave them. Until then, speak to you soon, everyone. Cheers, James. Speak to you soon, mate.
Bye-bye.